Alright, so this is my video assignment of effective instruction in social studies. Overall, the video presentation is going to talk about instruction in my content area, instructional sequencing, academic language in my content area, differentiated instruction and scaffolding, and then EdTPA central focus and my content area. So here we go. So the first one is effective instruction in my content area. So first off, good curriculum and instruction should contain the following. Here's a bunch of them. So essential topics and standards divided by unit and grading period using the California Content Standards, and then containing daily inquiry questions so that students are continually inquiring about different topics and different historical content, and then checking for understanding embedded throughout the lessons, making sure that all my students are on the same page, and then overarching questions for each unit. So having the daily inquiry questions, but when we divide each unit, have overarching themes and overarching questions that the students, maybe just one or two per unit, but that the students are going to have to answer by the end of the unit with after accumulating all of their skills and content that they learned throughout the unit. And then here we have daily, weekly, primary, secondary sources. So put daily and weekly. So you could have one throughout the week, which is pretty limited, or you could have more than one. You could have one a day. It just depends on the type of teacher and pedagogy you have. I prefer more the merrier. So just kind of depends. Then we have prepared interactive lectures. So we reinforce the content, the textbook content, selected readings, not using the entire textbook, but bringing out selected readings that are essential for the specific units and specific historical content, and then DBQs, primary, secondary, source-based. So we discussion-based questions based off of primary and secondary sources, and then a variety of assessments. So that's super important, using essays, projects, speeches, debates, traditional exams, quizzes, surveys, giving a complete variety of different assessments for your students. And then can't replace reading and writing is also super important, is the need to be able to build the skills to be able to write information and argument essays when they are in high school. So you can't replace it. Super important. Next, we have instructional sequencing. So instructional sequencing is the process that a teacher works through to teach a particular type of writing. So these are the different sequencing. So you have engage, explain, explore, and extend, all of which you have a different kind of flexibility of using. So the first one, engage, the first one is always pretty much the same. You have the attention getter, get the students starting to actively think about the content. So like introducing the topic with videos, discussions, connecting to daily lives, and establishing key background knowledge. And then step 2 is explain, the I do, and sometimes it is the we do, because the I do can be in the engage section, but it could be one or the other, and teacher or the students will be explaining the content or the skill. So for example, analyzing the First Amendment as a class, or having it teacher led, and then modeling the skills and the assignment that the students are going to be doing. That's where the I do comes from. And then explore, which is the we do and you do, exploring the daily inquiry question and the what ifs. So this is where it really gets down to collaborative work. So where there's teacher-students collaborative work, or student-to-student collaborative work in small or large groups, and then they are collaboratively practicing the skills and learning the content as groups. And then extending, so that could be the you do section, where just the students are working either by themselves or in groups, or where it's kind of the end where they are presenting what their you do's, where they were in specific groups and they were presenting their project or their poster. So connecting to the real world, having some sort of discussion of the daily inquiry question, or presenting their group project. So here we go. And then we have academic language. This one's super big. So academic language and social studies, that refers to the oral, written, auditory, and visual language proficiency required to learn effectively in schools and academic programs. So setting classroom expectations, being respectful, letting others finish, taking turns, and coming to some sort of agreement and listening. Students are going to have different perspectives, but having some sort of agreement, maybe agreeing to disagree, is what agreement they come up with. So all sorts of different kind of things and expectations that students need, and then many of the skills in relationship building take a year or more to build. So these skills and relationships, that's why you have to start from the very beginning, because you're building these skills and relationships throughout the semester and the years. And then the skills, so elaborate and clarify. Students or support ideas with examples, build on or challenge a partner's ideas, paraphrase and synthesize. So the two major ones, so support and ideas with examples, they're all super important, but support ideas with examples is primary or secondary sources to strengthen a debatable idea or argument. So for example, in history, appeasement. So should the Allied forces been used? Should they have used this appeasement with Adolf Hitler, or should they have been more forceful and not allowing him to gain his power in Nazi Germany? And then we have paraphrasing, so condensing the text to key information. For example, Bill of Rights, there's a lot of condensed information in these certain amendments, and then being able to condense them and make them into their own words, and being able to identify key information so that they can remember or recall what the First Amendment is or the Fifth Amendment is without actually having to recite the entire amendment. Okay, and then continuing with academic language just for a little bit. So we have academic conversations, the features of effective conversation tasks. So these are all the different kind of features. Require both partners to talk, require all people to talk, and then take advantage of controversies and conflicts, and practice with argumentation. That's really key. We build on opportunities for transfer of knowledge and skills to new and current problems, always kind of bringing in new and relevant content, because in history there's a lot of old topics that are being discussed, and being able to bring them to the forefront and discussing them and connecting them to their students' real life situations and real life problems is super important to get them entertained and intrigued and interested into the content. And then provide choice and ownership. So how they shape and direct the conversation, disagreeing, supporting, delving into the questions, asking questions, even bringing humor or connecting and comparing, all sorts of different types of things you can do with academic language and history. And then academic vocab development by conversation. So decide and debate cards, explore one word, use the best word, connecting with word cards, using academic metaphors, all different ways you can use key academic conversation vocabulary to enhance the conversation. So then we have here differentiated instruction and scaffolding. So the core idea, all students should be consistently experiencing curricula rooted in the important idea of the discipline that requires them to make meaning of info and think at high levels. So being able to differentiate and scaffold so that all the students, keyword all students, have the ability to access the information at a high level. So students need the opportunity to learn the basics, and students need to know how the learning goals of lessons and units for proficiency. So they need to know the learning goals before they really start and actually go into the lessons. And then guiding principles, grading should be based on clear learning goals so that the students and the teachers are all on the same level of understanding when it comes to what the students should be getting out of it. Evidence used for grading should be valid. Grading should be based on establishing criteria, and not everything should be included in grades. That's really important right here is space for students to have redos to improve the skills and learn from their mistakes. That's super important, because if you give a student a grade and don't give them the necessary feedback or the room to improve, they're just going to have the grade and not learn anything from it. More differentiated instruction scaffolding, so designs uncovering the content. The I do, we do, you do, so inquiry-based designs and I do, we do, you do. using essential questions in teaching, so bringing subject matter to life, what might happen if people become too powerful, and then the where to, so the strategy for developing a plan for learning, so backwards planning, starting with an end goal and then bringing it down to the bare the the details, so the lessons, the end lessons that you're actually going to teach to be able to get to that end goal of the unit. And then types in social studies, so the types of differentiation scaffolding, differentiated reading levels of excerpts and primary source, secondary sources, and articles, skeleton notes for guided note taking, differentiated roles, so group activities, and then breakdown step-by-step processes for overall construction, sentence starters, and then translations for the more the beginning EL students. You kind of need to start out with translations so that they can have some sort of base of being able to connect to the content. And then the last thing we have here is the EdTPA central focus in your content area. So the EdTPA central focus for history, social science is the central focus should support students in learning and using facts, concepts, and inquiry, interpretation, or analysis skills to build arguments or conclusions about historical events, a topic, theme, and or a social studies phenomenon. Keywords that I get from this is inquiry, so our inquiry-based learning, analysis, building analysis skills of primary and secondary sources for our students, and then building these skills to get to be able to construct their own arguments and own conclusions based off of the inquiry and analyses that they had throughout their lessons and their interpretations of the historical content and primary secondary sources. So that is the end of my video assignment. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.